You will come back, my friends. Skirt.
That's how we're going to start the episode. Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Pitch, the show where we look into various different IPs, whether or not they have their own stuff already settled and in the works, or if they just never really fucking thought about it. We're just going to be here and just, shoot the shit. So, Final Fantasy X. Yeah, Final Fantasy X. I'm just going to leave it that vague and small bit because this is a supremely unedited sort of series. If you guys know anything about my big sister Schweebs, the glorious one herself with the Ginger Mafia, we've talked a lot, her and I, in private about why didn't we get a prequel for 10? I say this because with Crisis Core trying to answer all the questions about what was Zack Fair like? What was Shinra like beforehand? Who were the first-rate soldiers that were actually there? Who are those individuals that made up the team? Why is Hojo automatically the scientist? So blah 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 blah. We had all this stuff for 7, which is honestly trying to make sure that you guys sympathize with eco-terrorists as protagonists. But we're not going to get a fucking prequel for these goddamn people that are forced by a fucked up religion and propaganda to then exercise a weird ritual that's based off of a Shinto myth involving Susanoo himself? Get the fuck out of here! So, I'm gonna get this first things first out of the way, where I'm bringing up this whole point. Yeah, Final Fantasy X is basically a fantasy retelling of the myth of Susanoo versus Yamato no Orochi. Yamato no Orochi has been turned into a giant demonic whale that can pierce through dimensions into the plane of the gods, which is now Dream Zanarkand, trying to say that all of the kami are actually dream folk within the Dream of the Faith, where the Faith are just retired summoners that are actually gods that were trying to keep demons at bay from piercing through to get to the palace with the Jade Emperor and disturb everything else. So Tidus, being of course one of the gods that was supposed to be selected, is Susanoo, that's brought down to protect one of the priestesses that's supposed to be a sacrifice to Yamato no Orochi. And that's how we get that whole sort of thing down pat, where he, although as the god of storms, is actually more tied to the sun, so he should be Amaterasu, or Amataras. No, it is purely Susanoo because of the whole swordsmanship and whatnot. Anyway, what does this have to do with Final Fantasy X as a whole? Not the first game. We're not going to talk about the first game. We're talking about the idea of a prequel, where we already have the necessary ingredients. We have Jecht, guy that went from a raging alcoholic who probably enjoyed beating his son more than he enjoyed being a happily married man to a woman that really is just indulging his bad behaviors as an enabler. It's like a very bad Simpsons episode in that whole regard. We have Braska, the summoner in question that is also the father of Yuna, that is just like, hey, I married somebody that is technically not recognized by my church or any person I've ever met. It is a whole hellfield out here. I don't know how to fucking feel right now. And so many other things that, well, it's a little bit crazy how many people are trying to make sure don't see this in a bad light, but it's so hard. And we have Auron, who we know the least about, but just know that he turned down a marriage proposal with somebody when he was a warrior monk. So we basically got a whole story we could be telling with this, but we don't have it. Why don't we have it? Here are some bigger questions to have, actually. If we're gonna be talking about this stuff that happened 10 years prior, where I believe at this point, Lord Jiskel is still alive. His son is in his early teens, maybe not even 13 at the time, because I think he's like in his 20. He might be 10 or he might be 12. I'm not entirely sure. But I am sure about one thing, and that is that there's a lot of things you could be touching on with this. Like, there are various operations that happen in the world of Spira that could have been brought about. What were the Crusaders doing 10 years ago? What was Yevon doing 10 years ago? What were certain Maesters doing 10 years ago? What were the Ronso doing? How did Kimahri end up meeting Auron in the first place? Why is there noise in the background when I don't normally do this kind of stuff with noise in the background anymore? That last part you guys could probably figure out. This is a fucking unedited episode of an unedited series. I'm just gonna go off the rip for this, but I'm raising a lot of good points that could be raised for a story basis. You have so many different moving elements that could be talking about where the evolution of Spira went into play, how Bevelle turned out more in a futuristic sense with how it changed up stuff with the Cloister of Trials, how Besaid became a little bit different in its own unique regards here and there, what Beacon Island itself could have been with these three focal characters, what were the Aeons trying to then do as a brand new power set that was then dampened 10 years later because of how Spira has been changing, because magic itself can change overnight like no one's fucking business, to be dampered with each generation and each root thing to the cause. What were all these different individuals doing that end up tying back into the main story? You have all of these necessary things to make a congruent story, but this is the problem. Why aren't you tapping into that market that is substantial right now? You already have people frothing at the mouth for things like a remake of all these classic games. There are Final Fantasy VI fans like myself that are still waiting for 6 to get a remastered and remake to include voice acting, to include all of the bombastic scenes that we didn't get in the 8-bit era, even though the 8-bit era is actually very more shocking than anything before, and we don't want to get censorship because we love the darker elements of it, Square. And there are also people that are waiting for a remake for 9 for whatever reason, for 8 for great reasons, to make sure that 12 is updated to make sure it matches with its remastered that came with the Zodiac era that came into the American audience sphere, and so many other stuff because 7 opened the floodgates, which also kind of went into why both Final Fantasy 15 and 16 did not turn out as great as they did, because they poured all their resources into a remake, but I'm going to do a video about that later. Oh my god, there's so much to talk about when it comes to this fucking IP! But this is the whole thing going back to 10's whole prequel as a story. You have the necessary VAs right now, before they pass away and before they retire, because they were already in Dissidia, for fuck's sake. You already have them on speed dial. Why not capitalize before it's too late? Why not flush out more on these characters that does not betray their character to then go forward into why 10 exists? Because if Auron himself discovered why the final Aeon is a bad idea and what that led into a big battle with Yunalesca, that should be incorporated. That is an interesting thing as a final mission. Him mowing down different fiends left and right to then drag himself through Zanarkand, bleeding, heavily injured to where his entrails are just hanging out there. He's just crawling and crawling. Kimahri has to save him while he's being dragged through as they're trying to celebrate the final calm for what they think is the last time before Sin comes back. Maybe for good, maybe not at all. They're hoping it's the last time. We then jump through all the hoops to then get where we are, and then boom, we have so much more of a dramatic presence here. We have so much more of a bearing about why the audience is going to be more invested to go back into 10. It is a marvel why people haven't done this, because the ideas are endless. What were the dramas 10 years ago? What made these three people grow as people to make sure that they knew what was happening? Because we had small snippets, but if we're going to have 7 get all of the love, why can't we do it with 10? Where it had the breadcrumbs, where it had all these instances left and right. Why can't we divvy up like that where it is necessary, where it feels justified? Because we're going to be self-indulgent for all these different games. Why not do it for the games that people have been clamoring for, like for the first ever voice acting installment? That makes a lot of different appeal for me, and it makes a big appeal for Schweebs, who I'm dedicating this episode to. Why can't this be a whole big exercise for everyone else that would want this for a prequel? Because we don't want 10-3. I heard the audio drama. The breakup makes no sense. How Tidus was treating Yuna about coming back from the hereafter, even though he was never alive to begin with, that makes no sense for a breakup, or about how they came up with why Sin came back into existence. I don't care about that monotonous bullshit that shouldn't exist. I care about expanding the history about what makes Spira so integral. Especially since they want to do that Easter egg in 10-2 about how Shinra might have been the person that turned Spira into Midgar. That makes it so much weirder. Like, seriously, let's just take a moment and take that, put it in a box, throw that bitch in the ocean, and hope that Jacques Cousteau can't find that bitch. That is so out of pocket, Square. Why would you do that? But anywho, I'm only like this because right now I am very hype. I'm about to be doing some big productions. I'm automatically on the fast track for 7 big recordings, both today and over the next 11 days at the time of this recording. And they're all on various different projects. I'm also going to be starting some big production editing in February for other stuff. So yeah, I am so hype that my energy levels are through the roof. I figured I might as well do this installment while I still had time. It was on my brain. Might as well get this out of the way. There you go, Final Fantasy fans. I did this for you. Am I going to do another Final Fantasy installment? Fuck you, that's what I'm saying. Enjoy this first one I'm doing, and do your fucking own for a pitch. Okay. I'm going to take a nap now, because that was exhausting.